if we want to talk in terms of psychological growth or personal growth, as it's sometimes called, then it turns out that there's a very clear, almost technical way to talk about this movement or this process. And I'm drawing on a little quote of Krishnamurti's that I saw the other day. And the gist of it is, without reproducing the quote because I can't remember it, the gist of it is that there is a process that happens to us, an involuntary process that we don't ask for and we don't necessarily enjoy it or want it when it happens to us. And what this process involves is, we could call it disidentification. We could also say it's kind of like a process of where something unexpected happens to us that causes us to change our viewpoint such that everything that seemed normal and natural and right and how things should be beforehand is suddenly revealed as being artificial. Now, this is a very familiar idea, really, in psychotherapy. It's like saying if you come from a super abusive family, you never see it to be abusive, or often you don't see it to be abusive till you've moved on, and then looking back at it with new eyes, you see everything that happened from a different viewpoint in a different way. And then once you see it as not being natural, as not being just the way things are or always will be, then that's it. It's like a scissors cutting a little cord. We can't go back then. It's kind of like the idea that once you see something, you can't unsee it. So this is a process of growth. It is painful. It's also disillusionment. It's a process of disillusionment. What we took to be right and proper and above board, we now discover to be almost like a trick or trap or conspiracy that we absolutely can't see until we get outside of it, until we move on. So this is a movement, and we can also say that it is kind of irreversible in that once we've moved on, we can never go back to how things used to be. And this corresponds to what we know about life. We often look back on stuff with nostalgic feelings, but we're being nostalgic of our memory of something. If we were to actually go back, we'd discover that the wonderfulness or the coziness of it only exists in our thoughts. Well, we'd discover that if we'd actually changed our viewpoint enough, which usually, being alive, living, changes our viewpoint. To live is to keep changing our mind, but of course that doesn't actually work. So there's a very big tendency to not take on board the challenges that would result in growth. And if there's any way at all that we can avoid growing, we will. In other words, that's a matter of practical experience. If we're avoiding the challenge, we're avoiding growth. Or if we take on challenges for some agenda that we have and that we're not letting go of, that's avoiding growth as well. In that case, we're just optimizing our game. We're digging in. Any sort of change that happens in occurrence with an agenda is not change, it's not growth. It's just digging into the furrow that we're in even more, digging a deeper hole for ourselves, digging a deeper trench for ourselves. So it gets deeper and deeper and we can't see over the edges and we think this is the whole world. So what this provides for us is a kind of a way of looking at things. That's quite simple. We could say that, well, there's the natural on the one hand, and there's the artificial on the other. And that's all that there is. If it's not natural, it must be artificial. If it's not artificial, well, it must be natural. So the thing is, having said that, we can then move on to say that the key to everything, the absolute key to everything, is our inability to see the artificial to be artificial. So we live in an artificial world and we don't see it in any way to be artificial. We live artificially. Our idea of ourselves is artificial. Ideas are always artificial, but our understanding of ourselves is artificial. The life we're leading, it's all artificial, but it doesn't seem so. But we can be guaranteed that it is. And the reason we can be guaranteed that it is, in almost all cases, is because we live according to what thought tells us. So all of thought's assertions, all the constructs that come out of thought are artificial. That's what thought is. It makes up its own stuff, its own oversimplified versions of reality, but it's artificial. It's like an exercise in, well, let's just say that such and such is such and such. What would happen then? If X is this, then what would happen? So the artificiality comes out of the kind of clause that let us suppose, or it is as if. So we say that, and then we define a reality, and then we proceed on the basis of what we have said that reality is, and we're leaving aside anything that we haven't said. So then we end up with that. Well, we go through some kind of exercise, and we can run that particular simulation. But the important thing is it's artificial. The important thing to understand is that it's artificial. And it has to be artificial because we're blocking out everything apart from that key set of assumptions that we've agreed to say are true for the sake of this experiment. So that's the thing about artificiality. It's a formal system. It's a formal system because everything has been defined. And unless it has been defined, it's not part of the picture. It's not part of what's going on. So that just gives us another way of talking about the word artificial, just to kind of show that, well, actually, everything apart from unconditioned reality, which is reality which hasn't been touched by the mind, by the thought, is artificial. Or rather, everything that has been touched by thought in any way is artificial. And the only way to get something that is true and good and honest and full of nutrients and wholesome goodness is to not interfere with it in any way at all. In other words, as soon as thought comes on the scene, he's booted out again. He's told to leave. He's got then there's no interference. There's no editing. There's no there's no regulating of what's going on. There's no editing. There's nothing being blocked out. Then you have natural. So we can say that the reason we have mental health disturbances, the reason we suffer from chronic mental health conditions, if we do, is because of this kind of illness. And the illness is we can't actually see the artificial to be artificial. So we walk along, we see the artificial, and as far as we're concerned, it's like Mother Nature in all her goodness. It's like absolutely trusted, and we have absolute faith in it. That's like our whole world. It's like society. We're born into it, and we totally trust it. We totally trust our parents, which is a biological thing. You'd be in shit if you didn't trust your parents. There's not much you could do about it. And maybe we do learn later on that we can't trust our parents, but generally we project this kind of thing which says that my parents can fix everything and will look after me and they're good and all the rest of it. And it's not till a lot later we discover that's an idealized image. In the same way, society, we project that kind of infallibility on society or on whatever organization we're part of, or on the church, on to religion. And so we're totally taking that, totally trusting the system. But it is artificial, and because it's artificial, it's always lying to us. So that's one way to put it. That's an artificial version of reality. It's always a lie because an awful lot has been left out, and no one's mentioning that it's been left out. So it's been sneakily left out, and we've got a very simplified or impoverished version. But we're being led to believe, not overtly, not explicitly, but implicitly, which is more powerful. It sneaks right into us then. It sneaks into our minds, and we never spot it coming in. That's how ideas come in. And the implicit suggestion is this is all there is. So clearly, this has a very dramatic effect on our psychology, because once we've adapted to a picture of the world that's provided to us by thought or by society, that's the end of the road. That is it. There's nothing more. And we're getting that message on all sides. It's a cut-off. This is it, but there's no thing beyond it. There's no depth. It just is what it is. There's no other level of meaning to it. So that means there can't be any growth. It means we just have to optimize our behavior, optimize our game within the system. That means conforming ever closer and closer to the system, to the offered reality, which means approaching closer and closer to something that isn't actually real, approaching a lie that we can't see to be a lie. And so this is the process of becoming unconscious. We're getting less and less perspective. We're believing more and more in what thought tells us is the case. And we're moving in the direction away from the truth, back towards the security providing lie, which is the thought. Now, at this stage, at this point in the argument, we can bring in another quote. And again, I can't remember the quote, but it's a quote by, I can't even remember who the quote is by. It's a quote that has, I think it's, well, I can't even remember who the quote is or who it's by, but what it says, or what the quote is about. Oh yes, Kierkegaard, that we can only live life forwards, but we have to understand it backwards. So we can never understand it forwards, only in retrospect. So at the point of living, at the point of life, which is where else is there to be, we're up against an abyss of incomprehensible that we are moving into. So here again, we have this movement, the movement into, like, I won't say the unknown because that implies it can be known, but the movement into the incomprehensible. This is very awkward for us because we have no reserves, we have no tour books or guidebooks or anything like that. Which means that we don't have even the smallest basis of a logical idea about what would be better to do. Is it better to do this or that or go here or there? We don't have any shred of guidance like that at all. We have no map. We have no map because we're moving forwards into the incomprehensible. We don't know what's happening. I don't know what I'm moving into. I don't know what I'm moving from, and I don't even know who I am who's moving. All there is this immediate, which is what the experience of being in the present always is, this immediate experience that hasn't yet been processed and put in a framework and made sense of. There's just the experience of being alive, or whatever else you might want to say about it. in retrospect, it's different. We can look back and we can see, well, that happened and I did grow, and that happened and this situation was there and I grew because of that. But the point I'm slowly coming to is that we don't know it to be growth. We don't know it to be helpful. So in the case of therapy, we always think, okay, what's the therapeutic rationale? What are we going to do to help the situation? Which implies that we know the situation and we know what's happening next. So that means we're not in reality. Whenever we imagine that we are in full possession of the facts, and we know what's going, well, not even full possession, but kind of a major, to a major extent, in full possession of the facts, and we know that we're going here and this is ahead of us, and that isn't reality. We're actually moving in a different dimension. We're moving in the dimension of thought. So that's not the same as growing, and it's not the same as life. It's another thing. We've got a fixed idea, and we're running a kind of experiment on the basis of that fixed idea. We're moving into an artificial world. We're moving into a formal system. So all therapy, in as much as it is mediated by thought, is an avoidance of life. It's going sideways. It's going in a different direction altogether. It's going into the mind-created version of reality. Obviously, if we know what we're doing, it's obviously the mind-created version of reality. It's only when we don't know what we're doing and we don't know where we're going, that's the real thing. So the point of saying that we don't know it's healthy, we don't know it's growth. Intellectually we might know it, but we don't feel it to be so usually, or maybe very rarely, is that it feels like a bad thing. And also, anything that life does to us that pushes us out of our comfort zone, and any time life acts on us, or any time there is any hint of life, that always pushes us out of our comfort zone. So it's this current that's moving us away from the comfort zone, moving us away from the artificial, the established boundaries of the mind-created world. But at the same time, this movement is, we have antipathy towards it. We don't like it. We don't like the movement. It's a movement of out of control, because anything that takes us out of the mind-created version of reality into the reality that was there anyway and is not being created by the mind, it's out of controlness. We don't know where it's going. So it's back to what Kierkegaard says about this forward movement. We don't like it, basically. We don't interpret it as good. And in fact, we would be inclined to interpret that as mental illness. So our understanding of what it is to be taking charge of our own psychological well-being is to be in control and to do things that we know about, to use strategies and to do things without, and we don't realize that is moving away from what's true. And so by definition, there's nothing healthy about that. There's nothing healthy about that, because our understanding of what's going on is at odds with what really is going on, and that's incoherence, mismatch between model and reality, between actual and expected. That means trouble whenever there's incoherence like that. Big trouble. We got it wrong. But the thing is that we never know that we've got it wrong until we move away from it, and we don't like moving it away from it, because that's a painful process. It involves fear, anxiety, sense of loss, and confusion, lots of things like that. Pain of disillusionment, the pain of believing we're in a very bad situation. So the way it comes on us, growth, is profoundly unwelcome, and we don't want to grow. and we'll do all sorts of things rather than grow, do anything rather than grow. So in other words, the movement towards wholeness or mental health is one that takes place against our will. We're kicking and screaming, and we don't want to go there. We really don't want it, so it's got to happen despite us. And the problem is that we don't see this at all, and we imagine that we are in control of our own destiny, that we're the sailor of the ship, and that we're orchestrating or managing all of this. And that's absolutely what we believe. For us, mental health and being in control are synonymous, which is very strange.